Imagine writing a detailed eyewitness account of an execution, down to the exact words spoken, the specific gambling games played by the executioners, and the precise bones broken, roughly 1,000 years before it happens. King David wrote Psalm 22 a millennium before Jesus of Nazareth was born. At that time, the Jewish method of capital punishment was stoning. The Roman Empire didn't exist. Crucifixion hadn't even been invented yet. The Persians wouldn't develop a primitive version of it until centuries later. Yet, Psalm 22 reads like a reporter standing directly at the foot of the cross. Today, we are analyzing the exact, eerie predictions made in this ancient text that came true to the literal letter. The very first line of Psalm 22 begins with a phrase that should sound instantly familiar to anyone who knows the crucifixion story. My God, why have you forsaken me? In Matthew 27 verse 46, as Jesus hung on the cross in the absolute depth of his physical and spiritual suffering, he cried out these exact words in Aramaic, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. By quoting the opening line of Psalm 22, Jesus wasn't just expressing his anguish. In ancient Jewish culture, rabbis taught by citing the first line of a scripture to point their listeners to the entire passage. Jesus was effectively telling the mocking crowd around him, look at your scrolls. Look at what is happening right in front of your eyes. The prophecy gets incredibly specific about the psychological torture. Psalm 22, verses 7 and 8 state, all who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. They say, let the Lord rescue him. Now look at the historical record in the Gospel of Matthew. The chief priests, the scribes, and the elders stood at the foot of the cross, shook their heads, and mocked him using almost the exact same vocabulary. They said, he trusted in God. Let him deliver him now if he will have him. The religious leaders were inadvertently quoting the very scripture that condemned them, fulfilling the prophecy syllable for syllable. In verse 16, David writes, a band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. Again, remember that when this was written, Jewish execution meant being hurled off a ledge and hit with heavy stones. No one pierced hands and feet for execution. Yet, 1,000 years later, Roman soldiers drove thick iron spikes through Jesus' wrists and ankles to fasten him to the wood. The text perfectly predicted the mechanical trademark of Roman crucifixion before Rome was even founded. Perhaps one of the most statistically absurd predictions occurs in verse 18. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Think about how specific this is. It predicts two separate actions: dividing clothes and gambling for a specific garment. When Jesus was crucified, Roman soldiers took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. But his outer robe was unique. It was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. Tearing it would ruin it. So instead of cutting it up, the soldiers said, let's not tear it. Let's cast lots for it to see who gets it. Just as predicted, they divided the clothes, but gambled for the robe. Psalm 22 verse 17 says, I can count all my bones. People stare and gloat over me. This links with a critical rule of the Passover lamb found in Exodus, that not a single bone could be broken. During a crucifixion, to speed up death before the Sabbath, Roman soldiers would take a heavy club and break the victim's legs. Without leg strength, the person could no longer push themselves up to breathe, and they would suffocate within minutes. The soldiers did exactly this to the 2 thieves on either side of Jesus. But when they came to Jesus, they found he had already passed away. Instead of breaking his legs, a soldier pierced his side with a spear. His bones remained completely intact, perfectly preserving the prophecy that he could still count them all. The physiological details don't stop there. Verse 14 states, my heart is like wax. It has melted within me. Modern medicine shows that the extreme stress and asphyxiation of crucifixion cause a rupture of the heart wall or acute pericardial effusion, fluid gathering around the heart. When the soldier pierced him, The immediate flow of distinct blood and water confirmed his heart had literally ruptured. And finally, look at the sign which Pilate hung over his head. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. In Hebrew, that phrase is Yeshua ha-Natsri v Melech ha-Yehudim. If you take the first letter of each of those 4 words, it forms an acrostic. Y, H, W, H, Yahweh, the sacred name of God. This fulfills verse 22 beautifully. I will declare your name to my brethren. Verse 15 says, My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth, describing the extreme thirst Jesus felt on the cross, which led one of the Roman soldiers to offer him wine vinegar on a staff. Skeptics often try to dismiss ancient texts as vague poetry, but Psalm 22 doesn't deal in vague generalities. It predicted the exact opening quote, the specific insults of the crowd, the piercing of hands and feet, the dividing of clothes, the gambling for a robe, and the preservation of every single bone. Dead Sea Scroll discoveries prove this text was locked in ink, centuries before the New Testament era. Psalm 22 is Holy of Holies of the Old Testament. It proves the divine inspiration of Scripture through perfectly fulfilled prophecy. What do you think is the most undeniable detail in Psalm 22? Let me know in the comments below. If this deep dive challenged your perspective or sharpened your understanding, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more investigations into the hidden mechanics of history and faith.